Usually when we talk about measuring success, whether we're talking about a business or a personal project or, some massive organization, there's this default image that immediately comes to mind.
Right, yeah.
It's like building a skyscraper.
Oh, totally.
You break ground, you pour the concrete, and almost instantly, everyone is just standing around looking at how fast the steel goes up.
Right. You want to see the progress right away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You measure success by the speed of the construction, the sheer height of the building, how much glass is reflecting the sun so everyone else in the city can see it.
Yeah.
It's all about scale. It's about speed. And, above all, it's about visibility.
It's highly visible and, well, it's instantly quantifiable. You can just point at it in a board meeting and say, look at what we built this quarter. Look at the metrics. Look at the skyline. It feels good because it proves we're actually doing something.
Exactly. It validates our effort. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, you step into the world of deep, lasting human transformation.
Right.
The kind of transformation that actually changes communities or alters the trajectory of a family and, endures for generations.
Yes, the real stuff.
Right. And suddenly, that skyscraper metric completely fails us.
It absolutely does.
We're looking at a landscape where the real structural growth is happening, where absolutely nobody can see it.
Yeah.
It's less like building a skyscraper and much more like growing a giant redwood.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, because the most important work, the work that actually guarantees its survival, is happening underground.
In the dark.
Exactly, in the dark, in the root system.
And that is a profoundly uncomfortable shift for a lot of leaders,
Oh, for sure.
Because we're biologically and culturally conditioned to love the visible.
We want the credit.
Exactly. The dopamine hit comes from the applause, from the immediate expansion.
Right.
But the uncomfortable truth is that a massive structure, whether that's a company, a movement, or even just a personal brand without a deep root system, is just a disaster waiting for the next big storm.
It's waiting to topple over.
Yeah. You can build high very quickly, but if you haven't built deep, you're incredibly fragile.
Which brings us to this massive tension we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We're looking at the work of Chris Villasas, specifically a fascinating framework he lays out in a book called Reimagining Church Disciple Making.
Right.
The subtitle is The God-Sustained Movement of Disciple Multiplication. Now, I know the title sounds incredibly specific to one field, but
it's really not.
No, it's not. What he is actually doing here is diagnosing a universal human flaw in how we build organizations.
Yes, exactly.
He argues that we are fundamentally measuring success backward.
Totally backwards.
So if you're listening to this on your commute right now or, while you're at the gym, think about your own team. Think about your own life. Are you measuring your progress by that skyscraper metric, scale, speed, visibility?
Right.
Or are you looking at depth, endurance, and character?
That is the pivotal question right there.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is how Villasas lays out his primary thesis, right from the jump. It's this idea that any lasting movement must reflect the nature of the thing that sustains it.
Okay. Wow.
Right. So if we're talking about a spiritual or deeply human movement, any attempt at large-scale growth must be aligned organically, not just structurally.
That makes a lot of sense.
He argues forcefully that the true measure of success isn't numerical expansion. It's not institutional visibility.
Right.
It's a multiplication that is rooted in fidelity, dependence, and simple, reproducible obedience.
Wow.
In other words, you just can't hack the root system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because while this framework is heavily focused on the Philippine church context and, the theology of disciple making, this rigorous dissection of ambition versus calling and growth versus formation, it applies to literally anyone who is trying to build something that actually lasts.
Absolutely anyone.
Right. If you are leading a startup or managing a nonprofit or frankly just trying to be a person of substance in a very superficial, hyper-digital world.
The traps are exactly the same.
Exactly the same. And the very first trap we need to talk about is what Villasas calls the illusion of scale.
Yes. He rigorously critiques our modern metrics of success.
Tell me more about that.
Well, think about how organizations default to measuring attendance, territorial expansion, budget size.
Platform reach?
Exactly, platform reach. We look at a massive crowd and we instinctively assume that, hey, because the crowd is large, the movement must be healthy.
We equate volume with vitality.
Yes. But Velasquez introduces this brilliant and, quite frankly, terrifying concept called religious inflation.
Religious inflation. I absolutely love that term.
It's so good.
But it's also a total gut punch.
Yeah.
Let's break that down mechanically. Because when we think of economic inflation, it means there is more currency in circulation, right?
Exactly.
The government prints more money. But because there's so much of it, the currency itself is worth less.
Your actual purchasing power just plummets.
Exactly. You need a wheelbarrow of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
So in an organizational or spiritual context, what is the mechanism of this inflation?
Well, it's the exact same dynamic. The movement is expanding in its outward form like. You have more people in the seats, more spectacular events, higher production value.
Way more noise.
Way more noise. But the movement is actually shrinking in substance.
Wow.
The character of the individuals isn't deepening. The resilience of the community isn't growing.
So it's all hollow.
Exactly. You have the appearance of more, while the actual intrinsic value is radically diluted.
So you have this massive budget and a huge crowd. But if a crisis hits, the whole thing just shatters.
Yeah, because nobody actually has the depth to weather it. Precisely. Velasquez contrasts this modern, spectator-driven model with ancient leadership philosophy.
Okay.
Specifically pointing to the standards set by Jesus in the first century. He brings up John 15, where the standard for success isn't just bearing fruit, but bearing fruit that remains.
Bearing fruit that remains.
Right. Endurance is the metric. And then he points to the famous mandate in Matthew 28, where the explicit command is to make disciples, not to just, gather crowds.
That's a huge difference, gathering crowds versus making disciples.
Huge. If we connect this to the bigger picture of organizational health, visibility almost always hides invisible decay.
Invisible decay, that is a haunting phrase.
It is, because when a system scales before its leaders are internally ready to handle that scale,
cracks appear.
Cracks inevitably appear. The pressure of the platform exceeds the strength of the character.
Yeah.
Velasquez makes a razor-sharp distinction here that explains why this happens.
Okay.
Audiences consume while disciples follow.
An audience consumes, a disciple follows. That is such a crucial distinction. It immediately reminds me of a tech startup that decides to aggressively scale its marketing department.
Oh, that's a perfect example, right.
Like they get a huge round of venture capital and they just dump millions into Facebook ads, Super Bowl commercials, influencer campaigns.
Before the product is even ready.
Exactly. Before they've actually fixed a buggy, fundamentally broken software product.
Right.
So what happens? You don't build a sustainable company. You just end up with a massive, highly visible audience for a completely broken system.
Right. Everyone downloads the app.
They realize it crashes every 5 seconds.
And they delete it.
You've actually accelerated your own collapse by scaling too fast.
That's a perfect parallel. You've brought in an audience of consumers, but because the substance wasn't there, they didn't become loyal users. They didn't stick.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Because I really struggle with this idea sometimes. If you have like a life-saving medicine or a revolutionary piece of technology, you don't keep it a secret to build your character right.
Yeah.
You scale it as fast as humanly possible to help as many people as possible.
Right, yeah.
So why isn't a positive message or community the same? Is Velasquez saying we should actively avoid growth altogether?
Well,
I mean, isn't having a big platform inherently a good thing if what you're sharing is genuinely positive and helpful?
that is exactly the tension this framework addresses, and honestly, it's a very fair pushback.
Yeah.
Velasquez is very careful to clarify his stance here. Growth is not inherently evil.
Okay, good.
The text states very clearly that fruitfulness is the goal. The problem is not scale itself. The problem is scale without formation.
Meaning scale before the internal structure is ready.
Exactly. Scale without formation is incredibly fragile. Think about the physical physics of it.
Okay.
If you inflate a balloon past the capacity of the rubber, it pops.
Right.
Velasquez points out that while the modern corporate world values speed, this deeper organic worldview values patience. It values enduring fruitfulness. When an institution grows faster than the emotional and spiritual maturity of its people, the systems just become overloaded.
That makes total sense.
The leaders become exhausted because they are managing an empire they don't have the internal bandwidth for.
Wow.
And the community becomes entirely dependent on the charisma of one or two highly visible individuals.
Instead of the collective character of the whole group.
Right. Velázquez argues that the real miracle isn't that an institution becomes impressive, it's that a people become fundamentally transformed.
Okay, so if rapid, highly visible scaling is fragile and, potentially destructive, the natural next question is,
how should it happen?
exactly, how should growth actually happen? If we aren't building a skyscraper, what are we doing?
Right.
And that leads us directly into what this framework calls the logic of the seed.
Yes.
This is where that redwood metaphor we talked about earlier really comes alive, but Velázquez takes it so much deeper into the actual psychology of leadership.
The logic of the seed is honestly one of the most profound concepts we can look at. He uses agricultural metaphors to explain organic, patient growth, and we really need to pause and examine the mechanics of a seed.
Okay, let's do it.
Think about what actually happens when you plant one. When you bury a seed in the soil, it looks entirely unimpressive.
It looks like a little rock.
Right. In fact, if you didn't know what agriculture was, it looks like a tragedy. It looks lost.
Yeah.
You just took something valuable, threw it into the dirt, and covered it up in total darkness.
Right. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. It looks like failure.
But beneath the surface, a massive amount of violent, necessary activity is happening.
Violent.
Yeah, the outer shell of the seed actually has to break apart. It has to die to its original form.
Right.
Roots are aggressively pushing downward, anchoring themselves into the soil, seeking water. A foundational structure is being established in the dark.
And nobody sees it.
Nobody sees it. And Velázquez emphasizes that this hidden work is absolutely essential. The root system must go deep before the tree emerges above the soil. Otherwise, the moment the tree gets any real height, the first strong wind will just blow it over.
And he grounds this in some incredible historical case studies of hidden formation.
He does.
He looks at ancient biographies to prove this point. Like, take the story of Joseph from ancient literature.
Great example.
Here's a guy who, as a teenager, gets these grand, vivid dreams of leadership and influence.
Yeah.
He knows he's going to be a big deal, but before he ever gets to rule Egypt, what happens?
He's thrown into a pit?
He's thrown into a pit by his own brothers. He's sold into slavery, falsely accused of a crime, and left to rot in a foreign prison for years.
Yeah.
From a modern career trajectory standpoint, those look like entirely wasted years.
A huge resume gap.
Exactly, a massive resume gap.
Mm-hmm.
But Velázquez argues those were the most crucial, formative years of his life.
Because we have to ask why those years were necessary. What is the mechanism of the prison?
Right.
It strips away ego. Joseph starts out arrogant, flaunting his status to his brothers.
Yeah, he was pretty annoying.
He was. And the prison forces a structural collapse of his arrogance. It builds empathy. It forces him to rely on something deeper than his own charm.
Or look at David, another historical figure anointed to be king, given the ultimate title.
Right.
But then he spends years literally shepherding sheep in complete obscurity and hiding in caves from the current king who wants to kill him.
Yeah.
How does a cave form a leader?
By teaching them that their identity is not tied to a throne.
Wow.
In the cave, David has to lead a band of misfits and outcasts without the power of the state behind him.
That's real leadership.
Exactly. He has to learn influence without authority. And then, of course, the ultimate example Velázquez points to is Jesus himself.
This part blew my mind. When you actually look at the math of his life.
What's fascinating here is the sheer ratio of hiddenness to visibility.
Yes.
Velázquez points out that Jesus lived 30 years in complete obscurity in Nazareth.
30 years.
30 years. And Nazareth wasn't like a cultural hub. It was a backwater town that people actively mocked.
Right.
30 years of doing manual labor, being a regular community member, before launching a public ministry that only lasted 3 years.
3 years of public ministry after 30 years of hiding.
Yes. 30 years of hiddenness for 3 years of visibility. To the modern, efficiency-obsessed mind, especially in like a Silicon Valley, move fast and break things culture,
that ratio is mathematically absurd.
It's a terrible ROI on your time.
Right. If I pitch that timeline to an investor, hey, I'm going to spend 3 decades doing absolutely nothing you can track on a spreadsheet, but trust me, year 31 is going to be wild.
You'd be laughed out of the room.
I would be. But Velázquez insists on this principle. Hiddenness is not the enemy of kingdom usefulness. It is often the condition for it.
Let's really analyze why that is. Why is hiddenness the condition?
Yeah, why?
Because human psychology is incredibly vulnerable to the intoxicating effects of public approval.
Oh, absolutely.
If you try to bypass the hidden years, you bypass the very thing that gives you the internal load-bearing capacity to carry the weight of a platform.
Wow. load-bearing capacity.
Right. You have to break the addiction to applause before you ever hear it, otherwise you'll become a slave to it.
That is so true.
Philesis warns that platform without prior formation produces mere performance.
And performance is exhausting. You're constantly managing a brand instead of living a life.
Exactly. And performance, while it might impress people for a while, inevitably leads to one of two outcomes.
Okay, what are they?
Complete psychological exhaustion because you're wearing a mask 24/7.
Right.
Or outright hypocrisy, where your private life radically contradicts your public image.
And this raises such an urgent question for us right now, living in this hyper-digital age.
Oh, it really does.
We live in an environment that is algorithmically optimized to reward immediacy.
Yes.
The algorithms on every social platform reward reach, reaction, outrage, and resonance.
They want you visible constantly.
Constantly. They don't measure depth, they measure engagement. Lassus points out that this environment actively trains our brains to measure our self-worth by our visibility. People want the harvest without the root system. They want the massive platform without ever having to sit quietly and figure out who they actually are.
Yeah, it's so dangerous.
It is.
Yeah.
They want the influence without the wisdom, the authority without the surrender. But when you try to extract heavy fruit from a shallow root system, you deplete the soil, the branches snap, and eventually you kill the plant.
Which brings up a very practical dilemma, because I can hear a listener thinking, okay, I get it, hiddenness is important, but my job title literally requires me to be seen.
Right. I want to ask you about this because the framework talks heavily about the practice of hidden obedience.
Yeah.
But how does anyone actually practice hidden obedience when their literal job description requires them to be on stage or running the board meeting or, being the public face of a brand?
It's tough.
How do you practice hiddenness when you were the CEO?
It's an excellent question, and it's where Velazquez moves from philosophy to very practical mechanics. Hidden obedience does not mean you abdicate your public responsibilities. It doesn't mean you resign and move into a literal cave in the mountains.
Okay, good to know.
Right. It means you deliberately, strategically cultivate practices that nobody else sees to ensure your internal life remains heavier than your external image.
I like that. An internal life that's heavier than the external image.
Exactly. It's about creating an anchor point outside the public eye.
So how does that work practically? Give me some examples.
He lists specific intentional practices for this deeper formation. For example, giving quietly, where you get no tax write-off, no plaque with your name on it, and no public praise.
No Instagram post about it.
Exactly, no posts. Serving someone in your community without ever casually mentioning it on social media or slipping it into a conversation.
Oh, that's harder than it sounds.
It really is.
Yeah.
We always want to sneak it in, right? Oh, when I was volunteering the other day. Another one is confessing your failures honestly to a trusted group. It also means actively seeking out a community that tells you the truth. Finding people who are entirely unimpressed by your title.
The people who knew you before you were important.
Right. The people who knew you when you were broke and who will lovingly but firmly tell you when you're acting like a jerk.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's about creating a counterbalance.
Yeah.
If your entire life is public, your self-worth becomes entirely tied to public feedback, which is incredibly volatile.
It'll drive you crazy.
You need a private anchor.
Yeah.
If no one in your life is allowed to correct you, you're already in free fall.
Absolutely.
Velazquez also mentions embracing patient processes, literally choosing not to artificially accelerate a project just because you have the capital or the technology to do it.
Yeah, slowing down on purpose.
Choosing to go slow so the people involved actually grow through the process.
Exactly. The ultimate goal of hidden obedience is to train the soul away from the addiction to recognition. As Velazquez frames it, you have to lead from the overflow of your life, not from image management.
Lead from the overflow.
Yes. Your external actions have to rise organically from an internal life that is grounded, secure, and quiet. Otherwise, you aren't actually leading anyone. You are just performing a brand for an audience.
Okay, so if we've done this quiet, hidden work on ourselves, if we've built the root system, how does that actually translate to changing a community?
That's the leap.
Does this redwood approach actually work on a societal level? This moves us perfectly from the personal to the geographical.
It does.
Because Velazquez doesn't just stay in the realm of individual character, he applies this hidden deep root concept to reaching an entire nation.
Right.
Specifically, the Philippines. And he introduces a concept that completely changes the paradigm of how organizations should think about expansion. the barangay vision.
This is where the strategic and the philosophical really merge in a fascinating way.
Yeah, explain the barangay for us.
For context, we need to understand what a barangay is. Administratively, it is the smallest local government unit in the Philippines.
Okay.
It's a neighborhood, a village, a local district. But Velasquez makes it profoundly clear that a barangay is not just a geographical location on a map or, a voting district.
Right.
Sociologically, it is a deeply complex, incredibly dense social world.
Right. It's not just a grid square. It's an ecosystem.
Precisely. A barangay contains deep generational memory. It runs on tight kinship ties. It is governed by unspoken dynamics of shame and honor.
That's fascinating.
It has unique loyalties, specific forms of local poverty, distinct aspirations, and very real, often informal power structure.
Informal power structures. Like what?
Like the local power broker might not be the elected official. It might be the grandmother who runs the corner store.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the person everyone actually listens to.
Exactly. To reach a barangay, to truly impact it, you have to enter the very fabric of that ordinary, messy life.
And here, Velasquez draws a brilliant, stark contrast between what he calls broadcast Christianity and embodied Christianity.
Yes.
Or, if we broaden it for any organizational leader, broadcast leadership versus embodied leadership. Let's really pull these apart.
Sure.
Broadcast Christianity is driven by media, platforms, social media reach, and massive centralized events.
Right.
It can cover a massive geographical area in seconds, but mechanically it essentially creates spectators.
Because there's no interaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Embodied Christianity, on the other hand, actually physically dwells among the people and forms relationships in the friction and messiness of real life.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of organizational strategy, Velasquez is breaking down why coverage is fundamentally different from presence.
Coverage versus presence.
Yeah, you can cover an area with marketing, with events, with programmatic initiatives. You can have a franchise or a satellite campus or a brand presence in every single zip code.
Yeah.
But true presence means the core values. In his context, the reign of Christ. But in a secular context, the actual mission of your organization taking root in ordinary life.
Coverage asks, have we reached the area? Did we hit our target demographic?
Right. But presence asks, has transformation actually happened here?
Wow.
Velasquez gives very tangible examples of what true presence looks like on the ground. It looks like neighbors helping heal broken marriages, caring for local widows who have slipped through the social safety net, actively rejecting local corruption in the marketplace, and reconciling divided families.
You can't broadcast a healed marriage.
Exactly. You have to embody it.
I want to use an analogy here because this is so critical. Think about the corporate world.
Okay.
Broadcast leadership is like getting a corporate mass email from the CEO.
Oh, I know those.
You know the kind. It comes from a no-reply address. It's got corporate letterhead, and it says, during these unprecedented times, we value community and synergy.
Yes, the unprecedented times email.
Right. It hits 1 million employee inboxes simultaneously. It has massive reach.
Right.
But it doesn't actually change the culture of the company at all. Nobody reads that and feels cared for.
It's an abstraction. It demands nothing and gives nothing.
Exactly. Embodied leadership, on the other hand, is like your neighbor. Someone who actually lives on your street, coming over and knocking on your door at 2 a.m. to help you fix a leaking roof in the middle of a rainstorm.
That's a great image.
It is the fundamental difference between reach and rootedness. A broadcast can spread a message very efficiently, but only an embodied witness can spread a way of life.
That is a perfect parallel. The mass email is frictionless, but the neighbor on the roof is entirely about friction and shared reality.
Yeah.
And Velasquez emphasizes that this embodied approach requires immense cultural intelligence. The core truth might be unchanging, but its expression must take root in local soil.
Right.
He talks about contextualization without compromise. You have to translate your truth into the local realities of the barangay.
You have to speak the actual language of the neighborhood, not just the literal language, but the cultural language.
Yes. You have to understand and address family honor, economic anxiety, those informal power structures we talked about, and public shame.
What happens if you don't?
If you just import a generic, highly produced, broadcasted model from a wealthy Western context, or even from a big urban center like Manila, and drop it into a rural barangay, it's going to fail.
It just won't translate.
Right. It will either be outright rejected by the immune system of the community, Or worse, it will be superficially adopted without any real heart transformation.
Oh, so they'll just pretend.
Exactly. People will learn to parrot the vocabulary while keeping their old habits entirely intact.
Which brings this right to your doorstep if you're listening.
Yeah.
Think about your own sphere of influence. Are you just broadcasting your values to your network?
Just posting about it.
Are you just posting slick infographics about your beliefs on LinkedIn or Instagram and calling it a day? Or are you actually embodying those values in your own barangay?
What?
And your barangay might be your specific department at work, your cul-de-sac, your apartment building, or your family. Are you doing the slow, incredibly unglamorous, often annoying work of physical presence?
Because broadcasting feels incredibly efficient, and it strokes the ego, but embodiment is the only thing that actually changes the world.
And that necessary transition from the efficiency of broadcast to the messiness of embodiment leads us to a massive, inevitable structural challenge.
It always comes back to structure.
Always.
Yeah.
Because if reaching the barangay requires this deep, localized, embodied presence, organizations instinctively look at that sheer complexity and panic.
Right, they freak out.
They say, okay, we have thousands of barangays. We need to build a massive, highly complex bureaucratic structure to manage all this local presence. We need regional directors, reporting metrics, standardized training modules.
Yeah, they try to solve the challenge of organic growth with heavy administration.
Yes, but Velasquez warns that this is the exact wrong order of operations.
This is such a common trap, and it takes us right into the danger of system-first thinking.
System-first thinking. Tell me about that.
When an organization sees a big vision, the immediate knee-jerk instinct is to draw up an org chart, hire middle management, and create KPIs.
Right.
But Velasquez argues that any kind of national or organizational renewal must be spiritual or internal, character-driven before it becomes structural.
Okay.
You simply cannot solve spiritual or human problems with administrative ingenuity.
That is so true.
What's fascinating here is how he diagnoses the historical failure of so many reform movements, both religious and secular.
Okay, how does he explain it?
He points out a mechanical truth. If you reform the systems without regenerating the hearts of the people operating within those systems, you are just engaging in a grand performance.
Wow.
Let's say you have a deeply corrupt organization, and you bring in a consultant to design a totally new, highly transparent reporting system. What happens?
People.
Exactly. They learn the new language of the reform system. The underlying problem of human greed or power hunger just hides, adapts to the new software, and continues under a different vocabulary.
They just find the new loopholes.
Right. Velasquez insists that structure is always downstream from worship. What people truly adore, what they actually value at their core, they will eventually organize their systems around.
That's a profound thought.
If a group of leaders secretly worships power and control, they will build power-based controlling systems, no matter how egalitarian their official mission statement sounds.
Okay, here is where it gets really profound for me. Velasquez uses a striking phrase.
Yeah.
He writes, a movement may have strategies, but no tears.
Ah, yes.
Now, if I am sitting in a corporate boardroom or I'm pitching a venture capitalist, crying during the Q3 earnings report isn't exactly considered a winning strategy.
Usually not. No.
Right. So unpack the mechanism here. What does he actually mean by tears in this context? Because he's not just talking about being sad, right?
No, he's using a profound metaphor for emotional and spiritual resonance. Tears, in this context, signify a deep burden, profound compassion, and a genuine disruptive grief over brokenness.
A disruptive grief.
Yes. It means maintaining a heart that is still soft enough to be moved by human suffering, rather than just annoyed by it.
Wow.
He is warning that if a movement lacks tenderness, if it has brilliant strategy but absolutely no tears, it fundamentally shifts its operational model.
How so?
It begins to treat people merely as projects, as demographic targets, or as data points on a spreadsheet to be manipulated for growth.
And the moment people become data points, the culture becomes toxic.
Exactly. When that happens, the movement becomes a machine. It might be a highly efficient, very profitable machine, but it is no longer a living body.
And machines break people.
They absolutely do. Velasquez synthesizes a core rule of organizational health here. Structure must serve life, not replace it. Good structure is like a trellis in a garden.
I love this analogy. Let's pull on this thread.
Okay, so a trellis is an administrative structure. It exists to support the vine so the vine can grow upward and bear fruit.
Right.
Without the trellis, the vine rots on the ground. But, and this is the crucial part, a trellis is not the fruit.
You cannot eat the trellis.
You cannot eat the trellis. A trellis has no life in itself. If the people in the organization aren't praying, repenting, acting with integrity, and living with compassion, if the vine is dead, even the most beautifully designed accountability structures will eventually be manipulated to serve the egos of the leaders.
You're just painting a trellis while the garden dies.
Exactly.
We spend so much time painting and polishing the trellis. We rebrand, we restructure, we change the titles, and we don't even notice the vine has been dead for years.
It happens all the time.
Valesis gives a great historical case study of this from ancient literature, looking at the early Christian church in Acts chapter 6. It's a fascinating look at ancient organizational management. The early movement was growing rapidly, thousands of people, and they ran into a very real, very modern logistical problem. A specific demographic of widows was being overlooked in the daily food distribution.
Right. It was a pure administrative headache, a supply chain failure.
And look at how the leadership responds. It's brilliant.
It really is.
The apostles, the core founders, didn't over-engineer a solution. They didn't abandon their core calling to become full-time logistics managers.
They didn't let the crisis turn them into bureaucrats.
Right. They recognized the trellis was failing the hind, so they appointed qualified, deeply mature people to build a better distribution system, while the founders returned to their primary work: prayer, vision, and teaching.
They built a structure that served the mission rather than letting the structure swallow the mission. And that historical example leads us directly to the final critical question. If we have the spiritual foundation in place, if our roots are deep, and if we are committed to embodied presence rather than just broadcasting, what kind of structure is actually appropriate?
Yeah, how do we organize a massive movement without crushing it under the weight of bureaucracy?
Valesis argues that the answer lies in radical simplicity and distributed leadership.
Which, on the surface, feels like a complete paradox, doesn't it?
It does.
We have this massive national vision to reach every single barangay, every neighborhood in a country, which sounds incredibly terrifyingly complex. But his solution is simplicity.
Simple as scalable.
We really need to talk about this shift from hero leadership to distributed empowerment, because hero leadership is what we see everywhere in our culture.
Oh, everywhere.
It's the visionary founder of a startup, the charismatic CEO who turns the company around, the celebrity pastor who holds the entire megachurch together by the sheer force of their personality. We love the hero.
We do love the hero, but Valesis is highly critical of that centralized, hero-driven model. He points out a glaring mechanical flaw. If one leader must always be the center, if all decisions must flow through them, the movement is inherently fragile.
Yeah.
It creates a single point of failure. What happens when that hero leader inevitably burns out, or falls into a moral scandal, or simply gets old and retires?
The whole structure shakes, the stock price plummets, the organization fractures.
Exactly. True leadership multiplication means releasing capacity rather than maintaining control.
Releasing capacity.
Yeah. Valesis calls for a model that is so simple, so stripped down to its essential parts, that ordinary people can reproduce it without needing professional training.
Right.
This is where that paradox you mentioned comes in. We naturally, logically assume that complex problems require complex solutions.
Right, that's the instinct.
But Valesis argues that if your method of growth or discipleship is complicated, only highly trained professionals can do it. If you need a theology degree, an enormous budget, and a production team to make a disciple, the movement will bottleneck immediately.
Simplicity is a theological strength. I just want to underline that. Complexity is the bottleneck.
Yes.
It makes me think of the tech world, specifically the difference between a walled-off proprietary software system built by a giant tech monopoly versus open source software.
Oh, walk us through that analogy.
Okay, so in a walled garden, think of a massive closed operating system. The tech monopoly has to hire thousands of elite engineers to fix every bug and build every new feature.
Right.
All the code is kept secret. The company itself is the bottleneck. If they don't build it, it doesn't get built. They are the hero leader.
Yeah.
But open source software, like the Linux operating system, which runs huge chunks of the internet, is built on simple, accessible code that anyone in the world can see, modify, and improve.
The code is shared.
Exactly. Because the core code is distributed to the entire community. The community builds it, fixes it, and scales it infinitely better and faster than any single centralized company ever could.
Yeah.
The community owns the mission, not just the CEO.
That is an excellent modern parallel to exactly what the Apostle Paul was describing in the first century.
Oh, really?
Yes. Velazquez heavily references a specific ancient text, 2 Timothy 2.2, which outlines 4 generations of transmission in a single sentence.
Wow, one sentence.
One sentence. It's a masterclass in open source leadership. Paul writes to his protege Timothy, "What you have heard from me, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also."
Oh, wow.
Look at the multi-generational node network there. You have Paul, you have Timothy, you have the faithful men, and you have the others. That is an unbroken chain of transmission.
And the key is that Paul isn't keeping the code secret.
Precisely. It is not about Paul building an empire where everyone has to travel to him to get the answers. He's not building a walled garden.
Right.
It's about Paul actively equipping Timothy to equip others who can equip others. This simple, reproducible chain protects the movement from becoming a consumer product.
It keeps it alive.
Yes, it makes it highly transferable. You don't need a multi-million-dollar building, a professional band, or a marketing budget to execute Timothy 2.2. You just need the core message, integrity, and faithful people sitting in a living room.
So to you listening right now, I want you to think critically about your own leadership style, your own team dynamics. Are you the bottleneck?
It's a hard question to ask.
It is. Are you building a system where everyone depends on your brilliance, your final approval, your endless energy to get anything done?
Yeah.
Or are you actively equipping others to lead, trusting them, and releasing them to multiply the work? Because if you have to be the hero in every scenario, you might feel very important, your ego might be fed daily, but you are actually capping the growth of your organization.
You're building a legacy of dependence.
Exactly. You aren't building a movement, you're just building a fan club.
And returning to the context of the barangay, this distributed simplicity is literally the only way a national vision can survive.
Because you can't be everywhere.
Right. You cannot parachute professional, highly paid executives or pastors into thousands of remote, incredibly diverse barangays. The math doesn't work.
No.
You have to trust that the core truth can take root organically. You have to trust that a local fisherman, a public school teacher, or a mother can lead a small community, read the texts, care for their neighbors, and multiply the mission.
They have to own it.
Yes. If the method is simple, they can own it and reproduce it. If the method requires a stage, a spotlight, and a production team, they will remain dependent on the centralized headquarters forever.
Man, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Yeah. Let's try to synthesize this journey we've been on through Chris Velazquez's framework.
Sounds good.
We started by completely rejecting the trap of religious inflation.
Yeah.
This very modern, very seductive illusion that scaling up our visibility and packing the room is the exact same thing as success.
Right.
We recognize the painful truth that an audience just consumes the product, but a disciple actually follows the path.
From there, we embraced the deeply uncomfortable, slow logic of the seed. We saw that roots must go deep into the dark soil of hidden obedience before any lasting, wind-resistant fruit can emerge.
Yeah.
We looked at the patient, ego-stripping formation of historical figures like Joseph, David, and Jesus, who spend years in obscurity to build their capacity.
Then we looked at the geography of impact, moving from the individual to the community with the barangay vision. We contrasted the shallow, frictionless reach of broadcast Christianity with the messy, vital, deeply rooted reality of embodied Christianity.
The mass email versus the neighbor on the roof.
Exactly. It's the difference between a mass email from corporate and a neighbor showing up with a toolbox in the rain.
We then explored the golden rule of organizational renewal. The internal and spiritual must precede the structural. We cannot solve issues of the human heart with administrative ingenuity. A movement must have tears, it must have compassion and real human burden, or its structures will just become a cold machine that grinds people down.
And finally, we dismantled the myth of the hero leader, replacing that exhausted model with the power of radical simplicity and distributed leadership. The realization that complexity is a massive bottleneck and that simple, reproducible methods like open source code allow ordinary people to multiply the mission infinitely without relying on a centralized superstar.
If we pull all of these threads together, the core message of Velazquez's work is a massive, fundamental reorientation of how we define success in any human endeavor.
It really is.
This framework forces us to ask a terrifying question. Are we building something that relies entirely on our own human momentum, our own marketing brilliance, and our own exhaustible energy?
Wow.
Or are we cultivating a people and a culture that is organic, deep, and sustained by something far greater than ourselves?
So, to you listening, whether you are leading a corporate team of 5 people, building a multinational company, organizing a local community project, or just trying to be a person of deep character in your own family. The question remains.
Yeah.
Are you spending all your precious energy building something impressive? A skyscraper of glass and steel that looks great on Instagram, but might completely shatter in the next economic or cultural windstorm.
Or are you doing the quiet, uncelebrated, hidden work of building something sustainable?
Exactly. Something with roots deep enough to weather the storms of real life.
This raises one final provocative thought that builds on everything we have discussed today.
Let's hear it.
We live in a hyper-connected, algorithmic world that is explicitly mathematically designed to maximize reach, to prioritize the broadcast, and to measure our ultimate worth by how many eyeballs we can capture on a screen.
It's exhausting.
It is. In that kind of environment, what if the ultimate competitive advantage, and frankly the most revolutionary, subversive act of leadership possible, is choosing to be purposefully small?
Purposefully small.
Yeah. What if the greatest, most enduring impact doesn't come from going viral, but from being intensely local, radically present, and focusing entirely on the slow, invisible work of the root system?
Imagine that. In a world screaming at you every single second to build a taller skyscraper, maybe the most radical, rebellious thing you can possibly do is plant a redwood. Because long after the glass and steel have rusted, shattered, and fallen, that root system will still be there, quietly sustaining life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.